Hey everyone, welcome to The Reason We Learn. It's been a minute. It's been a minute since I've done a show. I haven't really been super motivated. I've been more interested in writing articles for my Substack. Did you know that I had a Substack? Bet you didn't know. I do. It's at thereasonwelearn.substack.com. You can follow me there if you aren't already. Please subscribe. It's reader supported. And I've been trying to write long form articles there because I can, think about it more clearly and get more documentation for you. And, right when the mood hits me, producing shows every week, it's pretty daunting and I need to be moved like I was today, this whole week, in fact. But today I finally hit that wall where I had to speak out. I had to say something. So here I am. I want to preface this by saying that for many years I have respected and admired Yaron Brook. I am not meaning this to be an attack. This is a rebuttal. This is a challenge. This is, yes, it's a criticism. It is. And some may take it as, I'm scolding or whatever. And what right do I have? Well, I have every right, as much right as any other person in pursuit of truth has, to challenge someone who has put ideas out there that are, I'm going to be generous here, misinformed, and thus at risk of misinforming his audience. No risk about it. He's done it. He's done it not in one show, but 2 shows this week. And I am concerned because I do think, as a person who claims to represent, reality and defend reality and reason and facts, that he owes it to his audience to put out facts and opinions based on facts, not fantasy, not wishful thinking, not hypothesis, but facts. And so those of you who follow me know that I've spoken very critically of school choice schemes, so-called school choice bills and policy proposals, which is different than opposing parental choice of education. So let me get this right out there for those of you who don't know me and haven't followed me. And maybe this is the first time you've ever decided to tune in because you saw me criticizing Yaron Brook and you're like, who is this harpy criticizing our hero? By the way, I don't have heroes. There are people I admire, people whose opinions I value, whose analysis I trust more than others, but I don't have human heroes. I really don't. You'd have to pretty much throw yourself in front of a moving train to protect somebody or something for me to consider you a hero. And even then, I'd wonder if that was a rational decision. But I 100% support parental rights and parental choice when it comes to education. Make no mistake, my ideal and Yaron Brook's stated ideal of zero government involvement whatsoever in the education of our children, we share the same goal. We have the same goal, identical, complete, just abolition of those connections is the ideal that we would like to see everywhere, not just in America, but the world over. Okay. But certainly in the United States of America, that claims to defend individual liberty. That is objectively the way it should go. It is morally, ethically the way it should be. The government should not be in any way involved in what our children are learning because of the very obvious conflict of interest and potential for corruption. So, as we all know, that is not the state of the state. Currently, and for the past 150 years or so, the government has been very much involved. It was not always thus. Prior to Horace Mann and John Dewey and John D. Rockefeller and a host of other people, it was not the case. Individuals were responsible for educating their own children, and yet we had a very high literacy rate in this country for a variety of reasons, which I will not go into at the moment. That's not what the show is about. But we were not illiterate masses. We could not have had the War for Independence and our Constitution and so on. It wouldn't have happened if we were a majority illiterate. It's just not true. The pamphleteers had an impact because people could read their pamphlets. And the, associated newspaper articles that were being printed on the printing presses and so on. And now, was it every single person? No, but a sizable enough percentage of the population that they were, aware of why they were taking up arms and defending their farms and fighting for liberty and not just bending the knee to their king. So if you are under the illusion that we've always had a public school system run by the government, either at the local level or the federal level or the state level or any other government level. That is incorrect. That is not the case. That did not come into being until the 19th century, when children were quite literally forced at gunpoint in some cases into the schools. Ironically, they still didn't have to go to school all day, every day for 9 months of the year. It was a shorter day and all those things. But that crept and crept and crept until it became compulsory in every state of this country. And there are now constitutional amendments at the state level, not federal level, at the state level, mandating a public option be provided to the children of those states. That's every state has some version of that. And then, of course, following on the heels of that, they either did or did not amend their constitution to include compulsory funding by the public of it. But most of the compulsory school laws and the compulsory funding laws came after the constitutional amendment saying we will provide. As we all know, if the government says we're going to provide, that means you're going to provide. You're going to pay for it. They don't have money. You do. So that's the state of the state. We all agree. I agree with Yaron Brook that we are where we are. There is a robust public school system with teachers' unions having a tremendous amount of political power. They don't have collective bargaining in every state, but they still have a lot of political power because of the money they have. So that is also the state of the state. They run education. They run it at your state level, but the federal government is very much involved. And we'll talk about that today, because ever since we had ESSA, Every Student Succeeds, and before that you had other laws that came into being saying that, the federal government would mandate that states provide because you've already said you're going to provide education to all of the children in your state, you now must, these are passed by Congress, you must provide it in these ways. They are allowed to do that. They can't set a curriculum. They can't tell you how to run everything else in the state, but they can tell you if you're going to do this because of equal protection, you've got to do these other things. So because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, now we have IDEA. Because of the Civil Rights Act, we have other things, and so on. Title IX, all the titles about funding, so that a state cannot shortchange and be a little unequal in how they distribute that education. It has to be free and fair, according to the federal government. And the federal government is only too happy to come in and use its extraordinary power to make sure that it's free by their standards and fair by their standards, and add whatever other congressional edicts they want that, bully the states. How can they bully them? With money, of course. So remember, the states have to pay for these schools, and any bit they can get from the federal treasury, they're happy to take, especially because that means they don't have to go back to their people and say, we're going to have to raise your property taxes a little more. And we're going to have to tax the corporations here. It's going to be inhospitable to business more than it already is, and so on. So they've become increasingly dependent on federal money. It still makes up maybe 20 to 30%, maybe in some places more, but it's not the whole kit and caboodle, but it's a big enough amount that a governor has yet to step forward, even in the so-called red conservative state, to say, we don't want your filthy lucre. We're going to run the schools ourselves so we can keep it local. We don't want to be held to those standards. We don't want to report with this data. We don't want to do any of the federal thingy things that you want us to do in exchange for the money. No one has yet said no. They're more than happy to take the money. And in fact, they come back for more. And every chance they get, they go whining and crying for more. If the state isn't asking for more, the union's breathing down their neck at the federal level saying you need to provide more because our people out there in Kansas or wherever, whatever, need more. So no matter how you slice it, the federal government is getting more involved, not less. Yes, even with the Trump administration. For more on that, please go watch my show with Jay Kleisik, where we talk about the farce that is, we're getting rid of the Department of Education. No, they didn't. They're redistributing it around the federal government. You can find out for yourself. You don't need to take my word for it, but I promise you that is what has happened. So with that as the backdrop, that we have the same goal, get rid of it all. We agree we are where we are. There's tentacles, federal, state, everywhere in education. I will even agree with things he said in his live shows this week that the government of the state and federal government already have their hooks in private schooling to a degree. For example, though he didn't mention this because I don't think he knows, if you run a Catholic school or another private school and you take more of the general public. The Catholic schools take a broader swath of kids than the public schools with strict admission, okay? So they do take kids who have special needs. Because they do, just like a doctor who accepts some Medicare patients, they cannot deny them services even if they can't provide them. So if they don't have the staff, because maybe they have half a dozen kids who need these services, they then outsource it to the state, to the district, and the district provides it because the kid has to be served. It's now federal command. They have a constitutional entitlement to it. I won't say right because it's not a right. They have an entitlement to it that's protected by law. So they send them out to the district to receive services. Well, courts have already ruled that because of that, because they are receiving money from the district, that the district has some say in what goes on in this Catholic school. They haven't gone so far as to say you can't teach about God, but they have put pressure on them to teach about things they probably wouldn't be teaching about if it were completely up to them, because they need that money and they need to be able to provide for those students, or they will have the unenviable task as a Catholic institution of turning away some of their parishioners' children who have special needs. Not exactly something I'm sure they're eager to do. So there you have it. That is one of the just one of many, many examples where they can exert control. States get to decide what a school is too. So you run a private school in a state, you can't call yourself a school or an academy or any kind of a learning institution that without state, in some states, not all, without the state's blessing. You couldn't do it. And then, of course, you have to have different inspections and different things. Okay, so that's if you're a private school, you already have to bend the knee to the state for certain kinds of regulations. And you may be out there listening to me saying, well, why wouldn't we want that? Well, because you want total control of your child's education. One would presume you trust the school to make sure they're fire safe, that the building is sound, that they background check their employees. I mean, do you want the state overseeing every place you go for all your services because you don't trust people? I mean, if that's the way you want to go, but that's not the way that Yaron Brook wants to go in this country. And it's certainly not the way I want to go. So I'm speaking to him. You know, he admits in the show, and we'll go over that. Well, I'll show you some of his clips. He admits there's already too much control, certainly in public school, because that's what it is. But he admits they're already getting their fingers in the pie even without vouchers. But then paradoxically says that he supports any policy measure that could, he claims, make things better, freer, etc., give more competition to the public schools. So he's operating on the false premise that that's what school choice does. Again, we will listen to what he says, so you don't have to take my word for his words. I'm not going to put words in his mouth. He is saying that school choice vouchers, ESAs, scholarships, things of that nature are going to take money where it already is and just give it to the parents to do what they want with it. Well, that's already not how it works. So as I was listening, I'm thinking, sir, that's not how this works. That's not how it works in any of the states. And he says, well, and maybe in some states, it shouldn't be in any. So in other words, if you're an abolitionist and you don't want to grow government, you don't want to increase their monopoly, you shouldn't be sanguine about any possible state. You should be opposed to the policy. Now, one of the things I want you to listen for, when we do listen to his material, after which I'm going to show you my proof as to why he's wrong. So first, we're going to look at his false premises. I will challenge them. And then so that you don't have to just take my word for it, I will show you evidence. And then you can go do your own homework. And if you find that I'm wrong, by all means, come back and tell me. Because unlike Yaron Brook, I won't delete your comments like he did. And then he decided to use a word that I used in one of my comments in a second show to, directly address what I said, although misrepresent what I said. So, whatever. But if he let the comment stay, then we could easily show that he was misrepresenting what was said in the comment. So he says, false premise number one, parents are getting money that would otherwise just have gone to the school, and they're getting to take it in their little hands. They're taking it to the school of their choice. Like that. No, it doesn't work like that. That's not how it works. Whether it's a voucher or an ESA, it gets paid to the recipient institution. Even for homeschooler, it might go into an account, but they're purchases have to be audited and approved, and they can only be from approved vendors. The vendor has to be approved by the government. Well, what does that mean? That means the vendor has to submit itself to certain kinds of oversight and standards, which of course is going to cost money. Anyone who thinks you can, and anyone who has any experience whatsoever running any kind of business knows that compliance with anything related to government, approval for you to receive government funds equals an increase to your bottom line as far as what you have to shell out to lawyers and oversight and administrators and so on to make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. Okay. So you don't have to pay money back someday or fines or God only knows what. So already it goes up. Well, what are you going to do? How are you going to pay for that? I want to take the money because then I can get more students. I can get more people buying my products. Sure, I bet you do. But now you got to fork out some more. So who's going to pay? I wonder who's going to, oh, right. The parents are going to pay, right? So it's also not a dollar for dollar thing. I'll show you the data, but an example might be that you are in, let's say, the state of Tennessee, where they might spend anywhere from $13,000 to $15,000 per student, roughly, for the public school education. You don't get $15,000. He says, oh, you get $15,000. No, you don't. No, sir, you do not. You maybe get $7,600 per kid. Now, the irony here is it's also, Yaron, he makes the point it's their money. No, it isn't. Find me the individual taxpayer who pays, I mean, they're probably already rich, who pays $15,000 times multiples if you have multiple kids in property taxes or whatever taxes in their state are going towards education. Even from my property taxes, which I just got the statement the other day, are somewhere in the vicinity of $4,000 a year. A year. Okay. Now I'm in North Carolina. That's relatively low. If you're in California, New York, whatever, it's much higher. States vary. Some states don't even pay for school with property taxes. They use other taxes. But if you're going to go by property tax, which is the majority of states, that's what we pay. We live in a nice house. I don't live in a hovel. Okay. $4,000 a year. Of that, yes, the lion's share goes to schools. I think it's something in the vicinity of 65%, something like that, goes to schools. But it's still not the whole 40, whatever. I have 3 children. If I had been sending them each year, or I'm homeschooling them, and I were getting an award of $7,600 or whatever even the portion is for homeschooling, for each of them to homeschool, that would be like obscene amounts. I don't need that much. It doesn't even cost me $1,200 a year. That's the average, by the way. If you look at the statistics for homeschooling, it's roughly $1,200 a year average, and that's on the high side. So, he talked about, well, they can't afford to pay twice. Speak for yourself. I don't want to pay twice. There's a difference between I don't want to and I'm making the adjustments to my life to do it so that I wouldn't be out there going, give me somebody else's money because reasons. No, I want my money back in the first place to spend as I see fit, maybe not on school at all. I don't want to direct, give me $1, get $1, Mr. Government who broke my legs and now you're handing me crutches. No, I want you to give me a real opt-out. But according to Yaron, my choices are, as a parent in Tennessee or Arizona or wherever they already have these bills, my choices are continue to live by my values and my principles and pay for it my damn self, and then go try to fight for a real opt-out where you don't take my money at all to pay for something I don't want and I'm not using, and by the way, is unconstitutional to begin with, in my opinion. And I've been fighting for that as long as I've been like an adult and breathing. Okay. So that's my choice. And you're saying that somehow it's just as moral a choice for me to go, while I'm fighting, I'm going to take money from other people, so that I can have more than I was spending already and getting the job done. Because what? Feelings of revenge? Because what? So then in comes the next false premise that he might say, well, don't you want to deprive the public system of money so that they, you bleed them dry and they have to, they can't have it anymore? Please explain how that works. What's the mechanics of that? Since the money is leaving my pocketbook in the first place and it's going to the state, and then they're deciding who gets it for vouchers or ESAs or whatever, how much, what hoops they have to jump through today, tomorrow, next week, next month, after the next election. They can change their mind at any time. And I'm depriving that. I'm going to show you data of how false that is. No, I'm not starving the public schools. First of all, I don't get all of it. In none of these states do you get all of it, dollar for dollar. You get maybe half. Who gets the rest, Deb? Well, the school does. Only they don't have your child anymore to teach. So they're getting the money minus the kid. And what's hilarious to me is he used as his entree to this topic, oh, he was so excited about great news in the New York Times because they're so trustworthy, no narratives or propaganda going on there. The article basically saying public schools try to sell themselves as more students use vouchers. I have to show you this because I found it truly hilarious that we were using a New York Times article as our good news. Okay. A decline in the number of children and the rise in the number of choices has created a crisis for public schools. Sure it is. No, it isn't. Pure propaganda. And again, I'll show you the numbers. Did he check this out? Did he say, are they maybe spinning it because elections are coming up in New York City in particular, who's arguing that their schools are underfunded, which is ludicrous because they pay more than any other district in the entire country, probably the world. And then midterms are coming behind that. You know, we don't want to manufacture a crisis every election cycle, you guys. Oh my God, we're underfunded. There's a funding crisis. And it's never true. It's never accurate. Did he check? No, he did not. And when we're talking about, you know, the places that currently already have school choice, their budgets have exploded. And in the case of Tennessee, they put it right in the bill to address concerns, you know, to appease democracy. They put it right in the bill. They would guarantee that the public district would not get any less money than the prior year. So at year to year, they don't get any less money than the year right before. Okay. And that too is not time limited. That's not like, and then guess what? It's going to run out when you reach, it's not like they put anything in there that said, when we reach parity and public schools have 50% and you have 50%, too bad, so sad, fund yourself. You know, you're going to have to account for yourselves. No, that can go on in perpetuity. So as the private schools fail to accommodate all the children rushing to them, as the parents realize that a lot of the private options are really not that much better, especially now that they're taking government money and having to bend the knee to government regulators, as they realize that, you know, a variety of things aren't working out for them, or they simply can't make up the difference in the cost for these private schools, these online schools, these whatever they are, and they just can't do it anymore because they're still paying part of the cost. They tend to come back to the public school like, oh, here they come again. Here come the kids, right? And we have not done anything to reduce the government's size, the government's reach, the government's claim on our money, the government's claim on our children, the government's ability to train the teachers, certify the teachers, kowtow to the unions. All the things that wreck education in the first place are exactly the same. We're just moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic. We're moving the money from here to here, some of it, over here temporarily to appease the mob. This is what you wanted. This is what you're voting for. Okay, so we'll give it to you. And because the New York Times said a thing, it's such good news. A decline in the number of babies being born. Well, that's true for private schools too, you guys. I mean, they're also losing that. So then that brings up another little point that I thought I'd mention, which is that the when you take money and you subsidize a choice, this has been the case pretty much every subsidy. You create inflation in the cost of the thing that you're subsidizing. I would love, please, I'm begging you, audience, bring me an example where that did not happen. Just anyone, tomorrow, the next day, whatever, bring it to me. Bring me an example where the government subsidized a thing and the cost at least stayed the same. But if it went down, oh my God, unicorn, please bring me that example. Because every example I've seen, from Obamacare to college, when the government started subsidizing it, what happened to the cost? Now I have an example from just today. You may not know this about me if you're just tuning in for the first time to this channel, but I do advise parents on homeschooling choices and, you know, where can I get this class or where can I study that or what curriculum do you like or how should I get started? Okay. I had a parent come to me asking me for an online school that I would recommend that I thought was okay. Now, I had used one when I was sort of required to, when I wanted to homeschool, but I was in a situation, divorce situation, et cetera, where I couldn't just do it myself. Wasn't trusted to do it myself, even though I'm a teacher and I have a master's degree. I had to pick an accredited institution if I was okay. Well, I found one I could tolerate. It was called Williamsburg Learning Online. And what I liked about it was affordable. It was pretty reasonable for synchronous classes with the teacher. You're sitting there in front of, the kid has a class, the kid has other things. And I thought, all right, this is a decent compromise. He's happy. I'm content. And it's a reasonable price and I can pay monthly. So I recommended to a parent. Well, I recommended this over a year ago. And I did become aware that they were starting to accept or work with, I should say, public schools and take public school students towards the end of COVID when there were still lockdowns and things. They were servicing that because they couldn't handle where they were in Utah. They couldn't handle all the kids who needed online, especially in rural areas. So they were letting them go and had a contract with this company. Well, once school choice came on the ballot and started to be a big thing in Utah, apparently they doubled their prices. Now, she says it's just for this one class. She said, well, it's just one class. My kids took ad hoc classes. They weren't in a whole program getting any kind of discount. They took ad hoc classes. No class ever cost what she was going to be charged for one single class. Half the amount that she was about to be charged for one class, first semester. That's the effect of taking public dollars. They raise it to the level of what the vouchers will allow. Because why not? Why wouldn't they? Who walks away from money? It's sitting in the hands of the person. I have ESA money, I have voucher money, I got to spend it. The school's going to go, oh no, you keep that. Meanwhile, though, interestingly enough, in Arizona, I believe it is, some parents, especially the ones who had already been affording private school, because they don't differentiate. There's no means testing, you guys. They don't go, well, you guys are like, have FU money and you've been paying for private school all this time and you don't get it. No, they do. They've been just saving it, keeping it to the side in whatever these ESA accounts, whatever they have, they're keeping it because they can spend it on other kinds of things like, college. I thought this was for K-12. So they can just hoard the money and spend it on other things or just use it to defray what they put in their college savings. I don't know how that's working exactly, but there was a whole article I read a couple weeks ago about how people are like stockpiling this money. They're not even spending it. And there's not someone coming along going, use it or lose it, because even that wouldn't meet up with Yaron's, claim that you get it and you get to go take it to the school, to a school that they approve of, or maybe you don't. Maybe you just sit on it. Maybe you spend it some other time. Maybe you spend more than you need to spend. Who's watching it? It's taxpayer money. So even I, who don't think they should take the money in the first place, want to know where it's going. Some of this is being spent on religious schools I'm not too keen on, like madrasas. So the state is subsidizing not just Catholic school, not just Christian school, but also Islamic school. What next? The Bill and Melinda Gates of the greater tomorrow? As I happen to mention it, yes, guess who else loves school choice? The UN, the WEF, and the SDG goal people. So I wonder if Yaron is aware of that. So it's not a competition with the public schools. This is how they're saving public schools. And the last thing I'm going to say before I get into listening to his stuff and then proving to you what he's saying is wrong, is that the reason that the people who are behind the state, they just want a big, powerful state. The reason they would support school choice is that during COVID, I mean, there's a lot of people who support it all along, but during COVID, there was powerful momentum against public schools. I'm sure many of you felt it. Parents finally saw what was going on the screens in their living rooms, and they're like, what is happening here? And never before have parents been more sort of united across even political divides, saying this is bogus. Whether they complained it was bad academically or ideologically, parents were up in arms. And even after that, they were physically showing up to school board meetings. Long after that, the momentum was building. Don't you find it odd that suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, extremely well-funded PACs and groups appeared on the scene to sell you school choice policy, school choice bills? Again, these things have always been around. People have, even Thomas Sowell for a while, was like supporting it, whatever. I don't, just like Milton Friedman, I don't think he really thought it through. But he's not an objectivist, so I don't really hold him to the same standard of being quite as principled. He doesn't shy away from admitting he's a bit of a pragmatist, okay? Love the man, but he is a bit of a pragmatist. I expect better from people who think that pragmatism is kind of how we got here. Compromise, compromise, compromise. It's only this, it's a little of that, it's a little of this. It's not full thing. Well, this will make it better. That'll make, no. And so they didn't want parents, so many parents were leaving, going to homeschool without their money. They're like, bye, I'm out. I'm leaving. I'm out. How do we stop the flow, the outflow? How do we stop people campaigning against the unions? And the unions were in hot water because they didn't want to reopen the schools too. Huge momentum. Could have built on it. That would have been the time for ARI to be like, yeah, abolition now. Like that would have been the time to say opt out, a real opt out. Put a box on the tax form. I'm not sending my kid to school. Stop taxing me. Whatever. Bring it down to the state level. Get out of the federal government's purview, et cetera. That would have been the time. Not a peep. Nope. Nothing. I was yelling at the top of my lungs, but who the hell am I? I'm nobody. So how do we stop this? How do we make sure that we not only keep all the parents kind of dependent on us politically to keep voting for us guys who give them the vouchers, right? So the Republicans pick it up. We'll be the guy. We'll be the rescuers, right? So they'll vote for us. We'll give them a reason to vote for us because we haven't really done anything to protect them from this garbage in any state in the country this whole time. But let's distract them from that so they don't come yelling at us. Why is there SEL in our schools? Why is there CRT in our schools? Why are there people with drag queen story hours in our schools in Utah, in Tennessee, in Kansas? Like, hello, Republicans, what's going on? No, we'll do? We'll see. We have the solution. Here it is. Way out. Yeah, it still keeps us in charge. And gives you a big fat reason to vote for us in perpetuity because we're the guys you're going to come to make the awards bigger, to make the oversight this, that, or the other, to have, to punish these people and reward those people, whatever. We're going to be your guys, just like the Democrats are, we're your guys to the unions. But they're both fighting for the same thing. They're both fighting to shore up the government monopoly in education. They're just coming at it from opposite sides. That's it. There's no noble person in here. There's no person in there going, no, we genuinely want you to walk completely away from our authority. So we can't even come at you with school budgets, voucher amounts during campaign time. We got nothing to sell. No product to sell. No, they weren't going to do that. Are you kidding me? Show me the Republican lawmaker right now who is seriously arguing for abolition on any level. No, we need this, we need that, we need the other, we need mental health supports, we need meals. They're arguing for the same stuff the Democrats are. And for public schools, while offering you a voucher on the other hand. These don't sound like people who are eager to get rid of the public system. When they put right in the Tennessee bill, oh, it's okay, we'll guarantee your funding, don't worry. That's in Tennessee. Okay, so this is shoring up. This is a lifeline for public schools. The unions are sitting back and going, we'll pretend to oppose it a little bit, kind of, sort of. We won't be too loud about it. We'll be too busy yelling about other things, peace, love, harmony, DEI, whatever. But they're not really making a full-throated opposition to school choice because they know that when enough tax dollars, like instead of thinking of, oh, when enough tax dollars go over here, then they'll be bled dry and we'll have to close the public schools. Instead of thinking it that way, what Yaron should be thinking is, wait, what's the amount of tax money that once it's in the private schools and the home schools gives the government an excuse? Like wait a minute, we have critical mass over here of public money. Oops. Now they have an excuse for all manner of things: regulations, oversight, record keeping, inspections, testing. And of course, my favorite, the unions are big mad because you guys over here in your private schools you're purposely not hiring union teachers. We can't have that. You're taking tax money. They have collective bargaining in our state. You can't have a closed shop any more than they can have a closed shop. You're taking tax dollars. That's coming. And there are unions who've tried to unionize in private schools as it is. They've gone in there organizing. Don't you think it's going to be easier when they're taking public money? Of course it is. Not only that, the pipeline for teachers is exactly the same. It's not like they're letting go of the public money that funds the teacher colleges. So they got to get their teachers from somewhere. And what's the point of view of the teachers going to be? And so on and so on. Then when you add to that the left and the Democrats are just better at monopolizing systems that are publicly funded and turning them to their own use, it's called capture. I don't see a path. I don't see how this is incrementally towards more freedom, but I've talked too much. So let's just listen to what he said. And I'll explain to you We'll go over it again. I'm going to start with the first show and explain why it is, let's see if I can get this to a place where, no, I guess this is the right way, where it is, looking in the right view. I know you don't need to see like all this garbage. Okay, I guess maybe if I do this. All right, that's good enough. Okay, so what he did was he timestamped it, which is very convenient.
First story of the day, and this is kind of a really positive story.
I hope you can hear it because his sound is very faint, and a lot of people complain they can't hear.
This is coming from an article in the New York Times, and it's great because you could tell a little bit of a sense of panic or a sense of worry in the article itself, in a sense of not knowing how to deal with this exactly. Here's the title of the article: Public schools try to sell themselves as more students use vouchers. The subheading is a decline in the number of children and rise in the number of choices has created a crisis for public schools. Some are trying new strategies to recruit students. So here's what's going on. Over the last few years, a whole series of states around the country have adopted a variety of different programs, school choice type programs. Programs that grant parents money that would have been spent, money that, for most of them, this is their own money they've.
It's actually false. It's for most of them, it's not their own money. As we all know, the vast majority of people pay no taxes. I mean, by the time they're done, and if they pay property taxes through their rent, they're paying it through their home. It's compared to the outlay per child, it is not even close to what we spend. On average, in the United States, we spend $16,000 per head per year. If you have multiple children, multiply that. And it has only grown year after year because they keep spending on, food, mental health care, with the advent of community schooling, it's counselors, it's things that have nothing to do with education. It does not cost that much to educate a child. And one of the things that actually kind of bothers me about his whole line of what he's saying is he perpetuates this myth that 16,000 or even a sizable chunk of it is coming out of your wallet. It gets people really indignant, and it gets them feeling more and more entitled to these school choice vouchers, which is just obscene to me. Like I said, I'm paying what figure 65% of $4,000. And that would be the outlay per year that's going to my local schools. And I have 3 children. There's no way. And like I said, I'm middle class, ever so slightly up in the upper tier of middle class. Okay. I'm not working class. I mean, I'm personally working class, but I don't live working class. So it's a myth. But when you get enough people, just like the left does, you get enough people being indignant and my money. It's like, yes, they should be taking 0 of your dollars. We're in agreement. But it's not the money that would have been spent from you. It is not, for most of them, their money. Okay. The corporations who spend it, they're not getting it back. The childless people aren't getting it back. The working teenagers and young people and old people and everybody in between, whose kids are long grown and out of the house, they're not getting anything out of this. So it's really hard to make a moral argument. Unlike Social Security, where you put money in, and I know it's not a lockbox, that's not what I'm saying, but you put money in and you're getting back a tiny fraction, literally a tiny fraction of what you put in. Certainly adjusted for inflation and what you could have earned even just sticking it in the friggin' 5% savings account. It's a tiny fraction. It's easier to say that's your money and you're entitled to take it than this, like by a mile. Okay. So that's the first thing. And then he's going to talk more about how it works, that it just doesn't.
They've paid in taxes. Money that would have been spent on the public school is now given to parents, and they have a choice. And again, depending on the program, some of these programs are better, some of these programs are not so good. But generally, parents now have a choice to use that money for a private school, and in some cases, even for homeschooling. And parents are taking advantage of the choice.
Oh, why wouldn't they? Someone's going to hear money, free money. Of course they are. And especially when they've been told over and over, it's your money, you're entitled to it. Why wouldn't they? I mean, if without principles, most people would jump at that. You could come to me today and say, here's $7,500 to help educate your daughter for the last year of high school. You're already homeschooling her. Here, take it. I'd say absolutely not. Under no circumstances. I run a tutoring center online with another person, and we've already made the decision to take $0 to not become an ESA approved vendor, because we will not submit to the government's restrictions on what that would look like. So we're not going to, we already made the decision not to do it. Other people have made a different decision. That's fine. I have principles. I'm not going to be part of the problem of growing government's reach, least of all into my home or my tutoring business.
Parents are pulling their kids out of public schools and putting them into private schools. And indeed, homeschooling has taken off since COVID. And part of this is parents discovered during COVID how poor the education their kids were getting. And that really disturbed them. But most of them can't afford to pay for education twice.
True. They can't afford to pay for education twice. But as I just said, they didn't really pay for education the first time. They paid a small portion, a very small portion. And it's not, I've said this so many times in the show, and if you stop and think about it and you're honest with yourself, you'll know that this is true. The issue is not the cost of the education. It's the cost of the child care. Parents use school as a place you send the child, primarily for childcare, as a place to send my kid while I'm doing other things, whether you're going to work or you got other things to do or what have you. Or even if you just don't think you can do the job of teaching yourself, you feel like, okay, you're outsourcing that portion of your parenting. And I'm saying that free of judgment, I'm just stating a fact. You're outsourcing that to the school. So it isn't the education per se that you can't afford to pay twice for. It's all the other changes to your life. When I talk to people about why they aren't homeschooling instead of jumping through all these hoops and submitting to government, whatever, and why they aren't even pulling their kid out of a bad situation, with the exception of those who are foster parents or in a divorce situation who literally can't, and I was one of them, because you haven't got a court order, you have no choice. They theoretically could, but they can't, because they would have to upend their whole life, change everything around, and that's the cost. That the government can't fix that for you, by the way. So they can't. So the real cost is not the dollars. The real cost is my life is organized around me sending my kid to a place. And when he says they can't afford to pay twice, that again solidifies the myth that they're paying the first time. They're paying too much because it's more than zero. But that's not the real cost. That isn't the real cost. Okay.
Once in the form of taxes, and then again, for a private school. But what these school choice options provide them is an opportunity to get, in a sense, their tax money back.
No, they don't. They're not getting their tax money back. They're getting, yes, the money they put in, you could say theoretically they're getting back. They're getting somebody else's as well. That's the subsidy part. But they're not getting it. So when they say the money follows the child, I want to be very clear on this. No one's cutting them a check. Okay, you guys, it's not like you can go here, put this in your bank account and do with it as you see fit. But it's when he's talking, it kind of almost makes it sound like that, right? That's not how it works. The money literally follows the kid. So even if you come home to homeschool, you have to register your homeschool differently. In the states that provide for this, your homeschool ceases to be a homeschool. Okay? It becomes a separate category altogether under the state's purview where you're doing it at home, but you're not really a homeschool because you have a whole new set of regulations. You're taking the money, your school comes under that. And pretty soon what we homeschoolers worry about is that enough people will call themselves homeschool, take the money, go under that classification, and they'll say, we can't manage 2 tiers of homeschool. This is too complicated to administer. You know what? You're all going to be this. This is how it is. Yeah, you might as well take the money. And you know how I know that? Because in the states where they offer free lunch, free breakfast, whatever, and you have to apply. First, it was only the Title I kid, it was like only the poor kids were getting, you had to do means testing. Then after some number of years, it was like they were pushing the applications out to people. Apply for school lunch, apply for school lunch, apply for school lunch. When they didn't get back and enough, I guess, to justify the contracts they had with their political cronies who ran the food supply companies or whatever the hell it was, then magically people woke up one day and got an email. A friend in Colorado who told me this, wait, I make my kids lunch every day and I could perfectly well afford to even buy their lunch if I wanted to. And suddenly my kid's on free lunch. all the kids now, all the kids across the board in most of these states are getting breakfast and lunch included, especially the blue states, and it's coming to the red states as well. Because they weren't getting enough people getting that government slush money in for it because they weren't asking for it. They didn't want it. That will be the case too in states where the homeschoolers are like, yeah, but they still want the control. They don't want a sizable percentage of us out here who are like, nah, I'm not doing your thing. Because it doesn't help them get elected. It doesn't keep you dependent on them. So, you're getting the money where you like it out. We're putting it in an account for you. Do with it what you want. Because then they can go and justify raising their budget. Then they go, oh, well, we have to pay for this program. All these people are on it. And there'll be people out there sitting in the voter rolls going, wait, whoa. Just like they do now for the free lunch program. What are we going to do? Oh my God, their budgets are coming. We're not going to be able to feed the children. They're going to be so hungry. Meanwhile, there might be 30% of the parents going, I'm good. I'll make them lunch. I didn't take it. Oh my God, it's a crisis. Just like the New York Times article. What are we going to do? The enrollment's down. We won't be able to pay $20,000 a year for public education. Woe is us. It's all fake. They just want to siphon enough money off to justify the make work program for their political cronies, for the people who run the corporations that they've got on contract. That's all it is. And this is no different. It's not going to the parents, even as a voucher. It has to go to the institution or the vendor, and the vendor has to be approved.
And be able to use that money in order to fund a private school education. Poor parents who don't pay taxes, the government is spending money on their kids anyway.
Oh, so we just give that up. They're doing it anyway, so oh well. Okay. See, I have a different approach. And he's in the comments afterwards, and he's gonna say at some point soon, we can't just close the schools overnight. No one suggested that. Hello. No one, not even me. I didn't suggest we just shut them down tomorrow. That would be pretty catastrophic. I'm not that bad, but there is a pathway. Okay. And you know what the pathway is? You say things like that. We admit that we have poor kids whose parents, there's no way they could afford to send them off to be cared for all day and get educated without us taking care of it. So, we're going to rein things back to that public option that we said we were going to provide in the first dang place. Only we're going to fund it because it'll be fewer kids if it's only the poor kids, the truly needy. All right, we can means test that. We really can. It's not that hard, guys. And everybody else is going to be as responsible for educating their own children as they are for feeding them, providing the clothing, and all their things they did when they decided to have babies. And you could even phase it in. You could even set the bar fairly high to start with if you're really worried about what you classify as poor, but you would certainly siphon off the people who could perfectly well afford to educate their own children, okay? And since you won't be taxing them, even whatever amount you are taxing them, they'll have a little to shore up their funds to, take care of their own kids. So then you have just the schools for the kids who really, truly need it, okay? And you find a new way to fund it. Lottery sounds good to me. That's at least voluntary. How about some other taxes that are, funded by voluntary exchange, certain kinds of sales taxes, certain kinds of value-added taxes, certain kinds of taxes where the person goes, do I want to buy this today? Do I not want to buy this today? I pay the tax because I'm deciding to buy a thing. Okay. So you don't put it on food, maybe, but maybe you do have it on gas. We have gas tax here. Some of it goes to education, but you restrict it to those kinds of taxes and get away from property taxation, which makes you a serf. And therefore, you don't have to go, this house pays property tax, that one doesn't. Nah, that's not going to work. Lotteries and taxes where people choose what to pay. You pay only for the poor kids. We still have a public system. We rein it back. So now it's only at the state level per their constitution. And you gradually work your way towards moving and weaning off of that as well someday. But even if you can't, even if you're like 50 years from now, we're just providing for the very poor, it's so much better. That's an incrementalism, Yaron, that I could get behind. So if you want to talk about incremental change, you have to make sure that the incremental change you want is moving towards liberty, away from growth of government. Not we're going to take the money from here and move it over here and open up a brand new office of school choice and a brand new administrator with a brand new set of jobs and all new bureaucracy to administer it with a new set of laws and a new set of regulations and a new set of processes that vendors have to go through to get their, their little things stamped that they can accept the money. This is what happened in the medical profession. This is the Obamacare of education. Would you like to take a Medicare patients? Well, you have to take all of them. You can't just pick and choose which ones. I don't want the ones with the really expensive conditions because then I can't afford to, but you're not going to pay me enough to provide for them. That too bad, so sad. You can't have any Medicare patients then. That's how it works. You think this is going to be different? So the school that goes, we don't do special needs. We don't have provision for that. We know that, well, get some. I guess we have to raise our tuition and hire some counselors, hire some dyslexia experts, hire some this, hire some that. They're going to try. They're going to try. And they've tried this even with public specialized schools in New York City. Now, the courts did rule in the favor of the special schools and beat them back. That they could still have a test to get in because of the design of the school. But I'm not so sure they're going to get away with that in a generic private K-12 school that's not specifically for gifted children or specifically for kids, these kids who cannot possibly be served in some other setting. How are you going to justify that? It's going to be hard.
When they fund the public schools to which those kids go to. Now these poor parents are getting the money that would have been spent on their kids' education in a public school,
subsidy,
and giving them the money, and giving them the money and giving them the choice as to where to send their kid. They can still send them to the same public school, and indeed, it's still true that the majority.
By the way, this is a choice they have now. So no, they can't necessarily take the money that would have been spent on them anyway from the public coffers. But who do you think is more eligible for scholarships? My kid, my middle, ever so slightly upper middle class kid, or the poor kid who has a significant financial need? The private schools do offer scholarships. They do offer financial aid. Those kids are always more eligible for it and more likely to get it. So it's not that they have more, ironically, in some cases, especially if you're talking about a kid who has a decent ability to achieve, they're not a discipline problem, et cetera, and so forth. They have a slightly more choice right now than I do. I'd have to literally dig for the money. It's not across the board, not every time. Don't come at me going, it's not always the choice. Of course it's not. And there's only so much scholarship money to go around. But let's not pretend they have zero choices. Let's not pretend they can't ask for funds or raise the funds or do something else. They can. So they're not literally prisoners of the public school. It's just difficult. But right now it's difficult for anybody who isn't rich to just go afford private school for the simple reason that private school is expensive. You're looking at on the low end, $20,000 a year. It can be 15 for Catholic school. Okay. But if you're not Catholic or you don't want to go to that type of format of school, you're looking at about 20,000 a year at the low end, 40,000 at the high end. And that's outside of New York City, where then you're upwards of 60 grand a year. Could be even more. So the reason people aren't going to those schools is they're not rich. And this voucher ain't going to change that. You're not going to Dwight Morrow School or Collegiate in New York City with a voucher. Okay. It's not going to happen. Unless you're a rich person who goes, thanks. You guys are giving me some money to go to the school that the poor kids can't go to anyway, except on scholarship. I'll take it. And that's why people in Arizona are up in arms, because people who are perfectly well affording the very fancy private schools are getting money to continue to afford to go there.
Majority of parents do that. Or they can pull them out and send them to private school again, and in some cases, in Arizona, for example, they can even homeschool them. Now, you can criticize this whole approach as, wait a minute, we don't want government funding education at all. And that is true. Ultimately, we don't want government funding education at all. But how do you get there? You can't just tomorrow abolish public education and encourage private schools to rise and figure out and let the market figure out how to pay for poor kids' education.
No one said you could. Literally, no one said you could. Think you could round up all of us who oppose these schemes, and there's not a single person who said, yep, let's just wake up tomorrow and shut the doors. I mean, he makes us sound ridiculous. He makes the people who oppose this sound ridiculous. So the only people who could possibly oppose this, that's a straw man argument, are people who are just crazy and they're delusional. Okay, well, guess what I think is delusional? Believing that this scheme that he just described is getting you closer to the end goal that we both share. I think that's actually more delusional than thinking you could wake up tomorrow and shut the schools. You know why? Because COVID did it. And it was bad, but it was bad because people had an expectation of continuing to get the schools. Like they were going to come into their home, they were going to be on the computer. Nobody was motivated to go do it themselves. All right. And if you have an ideal that you're striving to, that you know is moral, you know is good, and you actually believe would be better for all and sundry if it came to pass, you can do amazing things in a short period of time. You can figure some shit out. Okay. Now, all that said, even still, I'm not advocating that we wake up tomorrow and shut all the schools. That I'm not going to do that. But I'm not so delusional to think that we use the school choice and, we'll just kind of incrementally get to the place I want to go. Paint me a picture, Yaron, because I might see in it.
It doesn't work that way. And
oh, shit.
You'd be doing a lot of damage to a lot of people.
Well, we wouldn't do it. That's why.
The reality is that, like most movements towards freedom, it has to be done in some kind of gradual manner, in some kind of manner that that makes sense, that is that takes into account the level of taxation that exists in our society today, the number of jobs that exist in our society today, the level of wealth that exists today. And
does it sound like he's like actually making it sound like it'll be even harder to get rid of the public schools than it is? I mean, it's I can't shake the feeling that he's actually not just supporting school choice, but he's like making excuses for why ARI or objectivists in general, whatever, haven't fought harder to be even before now, or put forth their own kind of, ideas. I know there are so-called objectivist people who have spoken at ARI who have themselves taken this money for their school project, their private schools that they've run. Ray Gurn, for example. Okay. I know there was a podcast about a month ago where a representative of ARI had a podcast and was talking to one of the people who was in that school who started going to work at yet another school, subsidiary of Alpha Schools, and which is an Austin-based, Joe Lehman, the tech billionaire, funded or idea-based AI school, and they're taking this money. So it's call me a cynic, but there's a part of me wondering, like, is he really trying to make the case that this is, a good way or the only way, or is he just telling you all the reasons it can't be, we can't do it better? Because everything he's talking about, this is all known. Why not just say water's wet? Yeah, it's a make work program for millions of people. There are millions of teachers alone, never mind administrators, never mind the people who have jobs maintaining the buildings, never mind all of that. This is all true. This is all true. But if you're gonna get stuck under the weight of the jobs and the economy works and all the things and the stuff, you're never going to reach the ideal. And it seems weird when you're in the process of making a case that this is a way to incrementally get there. How so? I'm still not hearing it.
And the attitudes and mentality of people. Just like I don't believe there should be Social Security, but I don't advocate for abolishing Social Security tomorrow. Just like I don't think there should be Medicare and Medicaid, I don't believe you can abolish them tomorrow. Again,
these are false premises. The people who are out there fighting to privatize these things are not suggesting eliminate it tomorrow. In fact, every single one, the people advocating for privatizing Social Security, privatizing Medicare, all the things have plans. They have proposals. They have ideas. They have incremental strategies that aren't this, that don't give government a permission slip to go where they're previously not allowed to go. They do the exact opposite. They don't do public-private partnership. They instead say, here's how we go, and we litigate or legislate to get the government out of this aspect of education completely. And that's how we move them. We kick them slowly out the door to the point where they just control less and less and less. There have been proposals. There are proposals. We should be having talks about it. ARI could be a great place to have whole discussions and symposia about how we might do it. But we don't just throw our hands up and go, well, we can't just do it tomorrow, so this is good. Government subsidy is fine because we can't do it tomorrow. And there's no other options, Yaron? because everything you're saying is contradicting objectivism, as I understand it. That, we don't accept a government subsidy as a step in the right direction towards freedom. It's a subsidy. It's not getting my money back. It is redistributionist. It is collectivist. It is the opposite of freedom. It is solidifying the claim that the government has on those taxes, because now they've got two tiers. They've just added another tier of education under their purview called school choice. And don't get stuck in the name. It's like Black Lives Matter. You're stuck on a name. That word choice. It isn't. It's government's choice offering. Here's another prison for you to go to. It has slightly nicer furniture in the cell. They discipline the inmates better there. They don't have the hardened criminals. Okay? That's what you're dealing with. Write it all down. I would love to write this all down. I didn't, call me impulsive, but had he not done a second show after deleting my comments, so dirty pool, Yaron, that's just cowardly. Have the courage of your own convictions to leave the comments there that are critical of you. I wasn't cussing you out. I wasn't calling you nasty names. I said incrementalism. I say incrementalist, like question mark, is that what you are? Because I don't believe that a staged approach towards liberty is incrementalism. It's not. You are literally moving towards freedom because you're pulling government out of things. You're not giving them new permissions to go where they weren't before. Incrementalism is saying, we'll just, we'll compromise with them. We'll just take some of the money over here instead of over here. We'll let them redistribute it differently because we like it better going over here than going over there. That's incrementalism. And thinking somehow that that's going to make you freer doesn't work. Milton Friedman learned that the hard way. 401ks were supposed to make us all much more receptive to getting rid of Social Security. That was supposed to pave the way for the movement to privatize Social Security. I'm waiting. I'm still waiting. Not only am I still waiting, but we have candidates running talking about confiscating our unrealized capital gains from those 401ks and IRAs. So all the little tools that were supposed to be getting us out from under aren't. They're not. And that's on top of the fact that they just come up with new and different ways to tax the crap out of that when we finally need the money, eroding it away. But they'll just print more money to inflate the currency so that the 401k that we saved up is worthless by the time we're ready to take it. That's another way to make it go away. We didn't get more free because of Milton's, incremental approach. And you might say, well, wouldn't you rather have a 401k or wouldn't you rather have an IRA than nothing? Dude, I always had the opportunity to save my money myself. Not pre-tax, of course, but as it is, I got to pay the tax on the back end anyway. And they're reserving the right to tax it any old way they please. So how am I exactly better off? They have more access to more money that they're watching over and controlling and that they can negotiate my rights away with at election time. I'm not really feeling the benefit here. The only difference is I have a little more control over how much it's going to earn in the short term. That's it. Long term, they have every tool in their toolkit to take away my earnings. It's not literally mine. So let's continue. But had he not done that, I wouldn't be here. I would have just left well enough alone and bitched and moaned on social media.
Abolish public education tomorrow. Well, let me rephrase it. I think you can abolish public education tomorrow. But you have to provide a means by which parents can fund the education for the kids.
Why do we have to? Wait. An objectivist just said you have to provide the means whereby parents can pay for their education. I'm sorry, what? Next, you're going to be telling me I have to provide the means with which to feed them. Why do I have to? Just because school now feeds them? So we have to provide this? Who's we? And why do we, just because we're providing it today, we got to provide it tomorrow? So you had me at, we can't just overnight get rid of it because of all the logistical problems. I mean, that could be a really big logistical hit to the economy, just like we saw during the COVID shutdown. But what? I have to provide what?
as you transition towards a free market where people are expected to take care of themselves.
I'm pretty sure Alexander Millet would like a word. I'm pretty sure he'd like a word. What?
Where people earn more money because there are more opportunities, where people are taxed dramatically less. So I'm all for a school choice. Particularly, I like education saving accounts.
Particularly he likes education savings accounts. Well, they are better than vouchers, but you still can only use them where the government says you can use those ESA funds, just like your HSA funds. But it's not use it or lose it. He doesn't seem to know that. That is why some of these Arizona parents are like, what money's just collecting in these ESA funds. And it's it's sitting there. It's not out in the economy. It's not, back in the pockets of the people who earned it in the first damn place. And as I said, it wasn't those people who earned it in the first place. The person who has 3 kids, 4 kids, that is quite a great advantage over the one who has 1 kid. So they're getting a slightly unfair advantage there. And I'm curious, why else does he love the ESAs?
Because education saving accounts do not, at least, for example, the ones in Arizona, do not dictate which type of school you have to send your kid to. They don't.
Okay, but they do. Because not every school qualifies as a ESA vendor. So it does. I'll show you the stuff.
Don't get involved in approving the schools that the money gets.
Yes, they do. Yes, Yaron, they do.
It goes to.
Yeah, they do.
The parent gets to decide that. And
no, the parent gets to decide which of the approved choices they can go to. So yes, they get a choice amongst, from the Chinese menu of government choices.
And again, one of the options is homeschooling.
To the government specifications. Again, your homeschool is different from the one who isn't taking the money currently. And there are tests you're going to have to do, you're going to have your kid take that you wouldn't otherwise have to take. And there are materials that you're going to have to use that you otherwise might not use. And there's a list of things that you have to cover and a number of days and all the things. And we already in every state have homeschool regulations telling us how many days of attendance and all of the things, but they don't, in many cases, don't tell us exactly what curriculum we have to use and so on. But if you're using government money, taxpayer money, not only can they already are doing it, and they will only increase those over time. That has been the trajectory, Yaron. They don't give you fewer regulations. They add more because it becomes an issue every election. Somebody on the left goes, oh, we found this one case of corruption where a parent used it to pay for a trip to Disneyland and we need oversight. And suddenly there's a whole new rule about you got to get triplicate. You've got to get it approved every time you want to go do something different. And if you didn't pass a test and you have to give the money back and blah, blah, blah. All it takes is one complaint about the corruption of this money being spent on things, which, by the way, is real. That does happen. And there you go. You're off to the races.
And then, in a well-designed education saving account.
Well-designed. There's your first. There's another flaw in the ointment, like fly in the ointment. Sorry. Is that, he's assuming so many things. There's so many false premises. I don't know which ones. It's like, first, that it's your money. No, it isn't. Then that's the parents are getting it. Not really. No, not even in an ESA, although it's a little bit more than the voucher, but still not really. That you have the choice amongst all the choices in the world. No, you don't. That, this idea that, I'm losing track of how many statements he's making that just simply are not the case. It's not how it works.
The money is in your account. It rolls over from year to year.
Yeah, it does roll over from year to year.
As long as you spend it on educational stuff, you can use the money in that account.
Like I said, K-12. Why are we funding people's college? What? Is this how we're getting around the student debt crisis? Or we're just going to take it out of the K-12 budget, raise the public budget to account for it. That's what's happening in Arizona. Their budget's exploded because they have this whole huge new expense on the private school side, on the school choice side. So they've had to give more money over to the public schools. They're not draining the public schools. They're just not. It's not happening.
And then if there's any money left after 12 years, you can use it for college.
And he's fine with that. It's not in the economy, Yaron. It's not in the free market. It's not. So you're going to use it for college, which is, by the way, heavily subsidized by the federal government. Otherwise, Columbia and Harvard wouldn't be biting their fingernails right now. These schools with bigger endowments than some countries have budgets. And it is like, well, you can use it for college. It's fine. What? Like, am I missing the part about we defend free markets, we defend reality, we don't want to increase the amount of money coming from taxpayers and going, coming out of the market and being circulated around like these redistributionist schemes? Am I so crazy?
Or take it out and I guess pay taxes on it. I think that's the way it's designed. Well, it's redistribution of wealth for some people.
No, that's what it is. It's not to some people. That's literally what it is. Like mathematically, legally, and in every possible way, it's not to some people, Yaron. You can't couch what you're saying in that. It's a contradiction. It is redistribution. We live in reality. That is what objectivism is supposed to teach. Reality is, it is redistribution of wealth. Period. Full stop. Not to some people. So if you're finding yourself bumping into this contradiction with your values and your principles, it is time for you to go back and check your premises, sir.
For many people, it's just a return of their tax money?
Again, we just discussed this. Line me up the people, and maybe Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos pay this much in tax money every year on their that goes to schools because they have a big corporation. Who knows? But no. Joe and Jane average, the vast majority of the population who uses the public schools are not paying this much in school tax each and every year. They're just not. It's not a return of their tax dollars.
The redistribution of wealth is happening anyway.
Oh, like I said, I can't listen to this anymore. Okay, so that's that. It's happening anyway. We can't just do it overnight. We can't I don't expect this from someone of his caliber. I just don't. It's happening anyway? And what? Therefore what? It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be happening. So your goal should be roll it back. Find a way to have it back. He should be on here absolutely opposing this and saying, he can say everything he just said. They're taking the money anyway, but this isn't the way to stop them from doing that. There's no path. There's no process flow diagram that you can show me. And I've been begging people to do it for a long time. Aquinas is on X has been saying, I'll pay $1,000 to come and debate me and explain to me how you get there. As long as you're somebody who is equally keen on getting there. See, most Republicans, by the way, that's the other thing that Yaron is totally ignoring the reality of the situation. The people pushing these bills are Republicans. Not one of them, not a one, shares his goal of abolishing the government role in education. Not one. They all 100% support it. They just want it done their way. They just want schools that they like supported. They just want to emphasize the family or Christianity or whatever. But they are not pushing these bills on principle, Yaron. They're not a bunch of objectivists sitting up there going, we're going to do this and we're going to put such strict guardrails on it that there's no regulations and we're just literally taking money from here. You paid $3,000, you get $3,000. You paid $5 here, you get $5. You get paid $200, you get $200. That's maybe how we would run it if we were of a mind to do that, which I wouldn't. There are better ways. And when you understand how the system actually works, you'll understand too why there are better ways than this. This is a very, very cost-intensive way to redistribute the money because you have to have a layer of bureaucracy with which to do it and comply with all the legal, the federal regulations to make sure you're doing it equitably. It's like I'm watching someone who has either lost his marbles or has been bought. And I can't quite figure it out. But these contradictions are huge. He's doing it anyway, so this is good. No. So then what he did was, then he went and I said, this is incrementalism and it's not good and so on. And I put it in the comments and my husband made some comments and a few other people made some comments. And he decided to double down. Hold on. I got to find that. Hang on. Let me pull it up here. Where he said, he mentioned the criticism that he was getting. And I know he's referring to my comment because I'm the one who used the word. I'm the one who used the word. I said incrementalism. Nobody else said that. And he's actually kind of like mocking me. He didn't name my name. Okay, super. So I guess I'm a big meanie because I'm naming his name, but he's a public figure. So get over it. Here's what he said.
Really good. And we haven't really started going to the nicer restaurants, I would say. But just
okay, so he's going to get to it.
Restaurants we've been to, everything's been good. Incrementalist. I didn't know that there was such an incrementalism was a bad thing necessarily. That I'm not an incrementalist and have betrayed Ayn Rand's philosophy by supporting a school choice. So let me say a few things to that, and to try to clarify my position and to make it clear where I stand. One, I believe, and we should continue to argue constantly about complete separation of state from education. That is the ultimate goal. Just like the ultimate goal is getting rid of the Federal Reserve, having private banks issue currency, doing away with Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, and any government regulation of healthcare.
And I stipulated at the beginning, we have the same goals, which is why I'm this animated, why I'm this upset. If he had totally different goals, why would I be here? Why would I have this conversation? But if the people who share the same goal that I have suddenly take a turn and go towards redistributionism, collectivism, and these kind of things and call it a solution, even a partial solution, when I think it's the exact opposite of a solution, I think it's actually going to make things worse. That's why I'm here having this conversation with you.
Just like we believe in a complete separation of state from economics.
Sure.
And ultimately, we hold that taxes should be zero, and taxes should be voluntary payments.
Okay, we get it.
By
and
citizens to the government. All of that is the ultimate separation of state from education, separation of state.
Yeah, but
from
you've kind of got to support it.
Separation of state from economics.
You got to relentlessly support it. You can't
any form,
half-ass it and compromise.
That is what I believe. That's what I think what objectivism holds. And if I had my druthers and could rewrite the American Constitution, I would include all of those in that Constitution.
Yeah, so would we all.
But the reality is that to get there, we are going to have to advocate for stages, with that always as the goal.
Great. Again, we still agree. Stages. Okay, let's hear more. How does he analogize this as a stage?
So, for example, it's going to take years, decades, to get to the point where we privatize all the banks and get.
Are we even trying to do that right now? I mean, I don't know that this is a great analogy in general, but I've yet to see how that's happening, but okay.
Get rid of the Federal Reserve. Should we, in the meantime, not advocate for intermediary steps that make the economy better and that.
Not at all what I'm saying, Yaron. I'm not suggesting that we don't advocate for intermediary steps, but rolling back regulations on banking is not analogous to this. Rolling back regulations on healthcare is not analogous to that. This isn't that. We're not even doing that. We're not doing those things. But I'm pretty sure when he goes and he advocates for improving banking and privatizing banking, he doesn't say, well, let's have the government have another banking oversight department, but you can choose a few more banks and, you can do something a little more with the regulations that you have. But, we're going to let the government come into the credit unions a little more than they already do because reasons. What? This isn't analogous. We don't currently have a system of mandatory government banks. We don't currently have a system where you're forced to put a certain amount of your savings in a government's bank. That isn't, he just got done with this whole speech of we're already doing it. We already have it. Okay, then it's not analogous. It's not. It is much more analogous to the healthcare situation with Obamacare because we had a robust private healthcare system and we had a private health insurance system, and we were told to make it more affordable to the poor people, that we were going to need, they couldn't totally privatize everything and get away from Medicaid and Medicare because they would have no way to afford insurance. So we were going to just subsidize them buying insurance. Yeah, and the rest of you are going to be required to buy insurance so you can participate and make this, but we're going to do that. And by the way, while we're giving them the subsidy, we're going to require other things like record keeping and data that goes along with it. What happened to the cost and quality of healthcare after Obamacare? What happened to the cost and quality of higher education after the government took over the loans and started giving more grants on top of that? Did things get better? No. This is more analogous to that. This has nothing to do with banking.
Reduce the power of the Federal Reserve and reduce the power of bank regulators.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. We're not reducing the power of any regulators, nor are we reducing the power of the state over education. Quite the opposite.
Should we not argue, for example, to get rid of Dodd-Frank? If you get rid of Dodd-Frank.
These are not analogies. Every single one of these is a false premise. Should we not do this? Should we not do that? No one's saying any of that, Yaron, but it's weird. You're like saying, so you're a vegetarian. Should you not eat asparagus? I mean, what? You're making no sense. None of these are analogous to this situation. And literally no one is saying not to do those things. I'm not even saying stop arguing for, like not taxing us for schools. I'm saying exactly that. But that's not what this is. That's not what school choice is doing. They're saying we're still going to tax you. Same amount, maybe more. And we're still requiring you to send your kid to school. That's not changing. Still compulsory. And, we're still going to fund the public schools 100%, whether your kid's sitting there or not. So that's not changing. And the only difference is we're opening a new office to handle some of the money, and we're going to let you have it through these vehicles. And what he doesn't mention is who's benefiting from that. And what are they going to owe the government politically because of it? Because it's not free market. Free market would be literally you don't pay the tax in the first place. There you have your $3,000 in your pocket and you go and decide what to do with it. That's a free market. There already was a little tiny pocket of free market educational options for the people who totally issued the public system and just stayed galt and weren't in it. Okay. But now what he's saying is no, that, people should be bring public money into all those places and put those people in the unenviable position of having to say, no, I'm not going to take your voucher money. I'm not going to take your ESM money. I got to not take it. So they go, fine, I'm going to go across the street to your competition who will take the state money. So now you, the principal person who's trying to run a truly free business, free of regulation, free of tax money, not in any way benefiting from somebody else getting robbed, and you are up against it. You have unfair competition. This is not a free market competition. The other guy has the government's finger on the scale, and Mr. Objectivist is supporting it. So case in point, we have Robert Bortons from Classical Conversations, one of the most, important homeschool vendors that are out there. They provide education for homeschoolers, specifically Catholic, but there are other people who use Classical Conversations. And he was approached to be an ESA vendor or one of these vendors and to get on board as a booster for school choice. He said unequivocally, no, won't do it. Did a whole thing about it. Would have made him would have made him a millionaire many times over, possibly even a billionaire over time. That's how many people are not already in Classical Conversations. He could raise the prices, whatever, but that's how many more people he'd get. That's how many more customers he'd get virtually overnight that he couldn't otherwise get. Like he would in the open market, he wouldn't get them. And it's not just because the people are taxed, because this money is more than they pay in taxes. He said no, because he didn't want to be regulated or told what to do. But now he has to compete for his same clientele, for the same people. He's got to compete with the Alpha schools and the other places. By the way, a place like Alpha School in Austin charges $40,000 a year. I promise you, Classical Conversations doesn't cost that much. So people go take their money to places like that or some other competitor of his because it is not perceived as their money. It's like, look, money from the government. Okay. And what's he supposed to do? How does he compete with that? He either has to make his prices be so much lower in a market where the prices are going up and up and up, which might then convey that it's not really valuable. It's not really that good. Why is it so much cheaper? Right? And if he does that, he can't get people to come in like as, staff or teachers or, anybody marketing it or whatever, because they're like, oh, you're gonna have to pay me more because they'll pay me. If I go over there to market alpha schools, they're going to pay me $100,000 a year. What can you pay me? Well, I can't pay you that. Oh, bummer. I'm going to go over there. That's not a free market. That's literally not. That's why people teach in public schools, not private school already, because they pay more. That's why people join the union. That's why people do a lot of things, because there's more money over there. This isn't a free market solution, Yaron.
The regulation, Dodd-Frank, not as an end in itself. The end in itself is a separation of state from banking, but as a step towards that direction.
And again, a step towards that direction. How is it? So we've heard enough, in my opinion. You guys can go out and watch this if you don't think I've shown you enough. I think you've seen enough about him saying it's already happening and it's a step in the right direction and all the things that I've debunked many, many times. But now what I'm going to do is show you some evidence, some actual evidence to support what I'm saying about how it's not only a violation of the principles that he claims to espouse, it's pragmatically incorrect. It's like, it's all these false premises. And I'm going to use several sources. So first thing we're going to look at is the Goldwater Institute. I like to think that's a source that people would think is somewhat credible. Okay. So here we go. Record-breaking $15,000 per kid spending in Arizona public schools amid ESA growth. I'm sorry. Did Yaron Brook not say that it was such great news that this was going to be taking money away from the public schools, that this was going to be an incremental step towards liberty, that they would have less money? Didn't he come on the show in the first place and say that New York Times was broadcasting what a crisis it was, that they have to recruit their students and they're going to be out of money? No, that's not happening. It's not happening in Arizona. It's not happening in Tennessee. It's not happening in any of the states where this is happening. In fact, quite the opposite is happening. Let's take a look, shall we? It says, Arizona's public schools are set to break the record for spending this year, nearing a whopping $15,000 per pupil, as they also receive $800 million more in state and local taxpayer funding compared to last year. This funding surge, which comes as demand for Arizona's Universal Empowerment Scholarship Account, ESA program, continues to grow, should be a shock to naysayers who claimed that ESAs would decimate funding for public schools. Is it a shock to you, Yaron? Did you even know about this? Did your producers go and pull this together for you? Did you do any homework at all? Or did the people who've been whispering in your ear down in Austin about what a great boon this is going to be to, the Ayn Rand Institute, whose campus is there, or who knows what, or to some of your friends like Ray Gurn and people like that, did they just tell you this was going to be great and you believed them? Because you have an obligation to verify that things you're putting forward as true are true. And you don't get to live in fantasy world. Objectivists don't get to do that. I don't get to do that. I don't get to come on here and tell you a thing is false and not show you how it's false. That's magical thinking. Well, why wouldn't we support this if it's going to do this? Well, if it did do that, I would support it. It doesn't. It demonstrably doesn't. It's not Deb's paranoid and maybe it will happen. It's happening. Okay? Turns out that couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, as the chart below shows, Arizona public education spending has soared. Explain to me again how we're freer? How this is making people freer? Because I'm missing it. With spending comes power. Political power. The more political power you have, the more likely you are to stay in power. The more dependent the people are. You tell people it costs $15,000 to educate your child, they believe you. Oh my God, it costs $15,000 to educate my child. I can sit there till I'm blue in the face saying, no, it doesn't. It doesn't even cost me $1,200. It won't cost you $1,200. Your issue isn't school money. It's childcare. It's your life. It's where you go all day. It's who you expect to raise your children. It's not the cost of educating your child. Okay? So you don't have an education cost problem. You have a childcare cost problem. And please, for the love of Christ, do not tell me that you need to now have government subsidy for that. Although one could argue that's what this is. This week's news comes from Arizona's nonpartisan Joint Legislative Budget Committee, which just released its new estimates. This doesn't make sense. The majority of this new funding will go to school districts rather than charter schools, even though enrollment at districts is projected to decline while enrollment at charter schools is growing. So who's getting preferential funding? The public schools, which I could have told you from day one. Government doesn't give away its power. It's like, when has that ever happened? Please show me where. I'm desperate for an example of when that's happened. When they say, we're going to pass a bill where we get to go and do a thing that we weren't doing before. And we're going to appropriate funds to do the thing that we weren't doing before. Even though we broke the other thing that was kind of like it. We totally wrecked it. It's really, really bad. So bad. You're desperate to get away from that thing that we touch and we have our fingers all over. So we're going to come and offer you a thing that we also put our hands all over. And that's your solution. And people are going, yay! It's so great. It's a step in the right direction. Right into the kudzu. Okay. The total funding for K-12 public education in Arizona is now projected to hit $14,673 per child. That number not only sets a new spending record on Arizona K-12 students, but it also tops the price of college at institutions such as Arizona State, where resident undergraduate tuition fees are $13,161 this year. Moreover, the reported per pupil K-12 spending numbers understates the actual taxpayer cost of traditional public schools, since it's an average of both district and public charter schools, and the latter receive roughly $2,000 less per pupil than their district peers. They're always going to preference themselves, Yaron. Always. You're going to get some school choice money, but they get more. Their funding's not going to go anywhere, but yours could go down. After you got your kid all hooked in the private school, then go, yeah, we're going to have to, the Democrat comes into office, we're going to cut those vouchers. Republican comes into office, we're going to raise the vouchers. Public schools, and they can't be seen to be depriving the poor kids. So don't worry, we'll keep yours where it is. We just have to give more to the private people. Because that's what Republicans do. Republicans don't cut over here. They don't cut anything. They just give more to the people over here. And everybody goes, yay. Just ask Donald Trump. So he talks about Arizona. There's Arizona. Okay. So that's Arizona. Then let's take a little gander at, we're going to look at federal funding since I talked about it. Now, to be fair, this is from October of 2023, but I'm not looking so much at the specific dollar figures as I want to show you the federal involvement. I just want you to have a visual sense of the scope of the federal power over education, so that you understand that I'm not just paranoid when I say that when you have the states suddenly funding private education and homeschoolings, the federal government's going to go, what, hun? What? I'm sorry, what? Wait, new places for us that we have to oversee and monitor and make sure is equal because taxpayer dollars, because equality under the law, because ESSA, because IDEA, because title legislation. Oh, wait, what? Okay, there are laws that immediately come into play. So, key things to know: federal government has increasingly, it's not decreasing, increasing year over year, shaped public education through funding to support higher cost students. So the more these kids go, I can't find a private school that will take me because reasons. Okay. Oh, well, state of Tennessee, state of Arizona, what are you going to do? You're going to have to find a way. What are you going to do? You're going to have to create incentives or disincentives for the private schools to turn them away because you're not giving them an equal choice. That's not going to work for you. Tennessee typically receives $1.1 billion annually in federal K-12 funding for over a dozen programs that have grant-specific and broader federal requirements. In recent years, Tennessee's actions or preferences related to K-12 have at times conflicted with current or proposed federal policy for testing and gender-related policies. They conflict. Remember, politics come in? Yeah. Biden goes, you got to teach gender stuff. Tennessee says, no, we don't want to. And they go to war with each other. And what's hanging in the balance? The funding. Does Tennessee go, keep your money, shove it up your butt? No. They try to find a compromise. They try to figure it out. But generally speaking, if they decide to stick to their guns because they have enough voters that say we don't want the gender policy, they have to make up their money some other way. Increases in property taxes, maybe? They don't just have the funding need go away. That's never one of the options. They don't make cuts. They don't send people home. They don't fire the third assistant principal. All right. Some trade-offs and considerations for federal dollars, the requirement attached to those funds, and what would happen if Tennessee rejected those dollars include: no state has ever rejected federal K-12 dollars. So much is unknown. Okay. I hope that makes my point about how great the power is. They've just never done it. It's completely untested. And I haven't heard Yaron Brook going, hey, state governors, start coming up with ways to, move things around in your state budget wise so that you can afford to tell the federal government to blow it out their ear. That would be a giant step in the right direction, because now you're at least bringing education that is already public and already taxing us, at least back to the state level. At least you're getting the federal government out of it. That would be a huge improvement. I would celebrate. I would personally get drunk on a live stream so you could all laugh at me if we just did that. Am I too extreme for you? All right. So state and local governments bear most of the legal and financial responsibility. All 50 state constituents mandate public education. And fiscal year 2019, before the pandemic, about 92% of all dollars came from state and local revenues. So as much as the federal government has a lot to say legally, and they do hold some purse strings, even with 92% that they're responsible for, they're still not willing to give it up. And in some states, it's more than others, as I said. Federal government is increasingly shaped, blah, blah, blah. Okay, who said that? Broad authority to both spend federal dollars and attach far-reaching requirements for recipients of those funds. So you create a school choice option that goes into the private schools and into the home schools. You've now also invited in the federal government. If they decide, as they have in the big, beautiful bill, and let me cut over to that. I did an article recently challenging John Stossel on his statements about school choice. And I brought it up because a lot of people didn't know, because how are you going to read a 1,000-page bill, right? Here it is. The bill itself of the federal government. The language of the bill itself offers fertile ground in which to sow the seeds of government intrusion on both sides of the political aisle. As the NPR piece makes clear, private schools, and there was an NPR piece that did this. You can say NPR is biased. Well, it happens to be true. Okay. Are not currently bound. The private schools are not currently bound by the IDEA. As it currently stands, without vouchers, without ESA, they don't have to obey that. Okay. They can turn away students they don't want or can't serve. Yet subsidy scholarship recipient schools must accept IDEA entitled students and provide them with services they need. Here it is. No amount paid to an elementary or secondary school shall be considered a qualified elementary or secondary education expense for the purposes of this section unless such school demonstrates that it maintains a policy whereby its admission standards do not take into account whether the student seeking enrollment has a current individualized, that's an IEP. That could be a kid with, ADD. We're not talking about cerebral palsy here. We're just talking about a kid that's got, I got ADD. And if you decide, I don't want a school full of kids with ADD or dyslexia, or I don't have the staff to deal with it, you can't turn them away. Nor takes into account the student requires equitable services for a learning disability. And if a student does have such an individualized education plan, the school abides by the plan's terms and provides services outlined therein. And if they can't provide them, they have to outsource them to the local district. This is without school choice bills being applied. This is just federal policy. They're not going to consider them a qualified elementary or secondary expense for these school choice bills if they come in. They've already put it into law. So what does that mean? Does that mean your state's not going to tax you on that benefit that you just got, but the federal government is? They're going to treat it like income? Are they going to tell the school, you can't do this, you're out of line, you better do it, or you're not going to be able to accept these funds? That's more likely. Elsewhere in the bill, there's language that prohibits any government entity to mandate, direct, or control any aspect of the private or religious elementary, secondary education institutions. It seems to contradict itself in the same bill. There's nothing in this bill that makes clear who would enforce either the requirement for equitable services or the protection of private school independence. You don't have to take my word for it. Go read the bill. And I put the page. Do you really want to gamble on future politicians voting to reduce the federal government's power to determine when, to whom, by what bureaucratic process, at whatever that would cost, and for how much your tax dollars can be used to fund private schools? You think they're going to make it easier? Do you want to take a chance on that? So that's what the bill is now law. I said, but if this bill becomes law, because it was before it became law, it is now law. So there's that. Okay. So back to our little federal funding thing. Now I'm going to show you some charts. These are the K-12 activities that are subject to federal requirements. ESSA, Individual Disabilities Child Nutrition Program. You take tax money over the private school. All of these could potentially come into play, likely will. All right. Is that going to change the cost of the school, do you think? Yes. Is it going to change the nature of the school? Yes. Can the school do whatever it wants still, even though it's getting public tax money? No. And people telling you that it can are lying to you. In a typical year, nearly 90% of Tennessee's federal K-12 funding is for nutrition Title I students with disabilities. This is where it breaks down. You guys can, I'll put the links afterwards in the show notes. You can go peruse this at your leisure. Okay. Tennessee schools were more dependent on federal K-12 dollars than all but 13 other states. Now, Tennessee now is pushing the vouchers as well. They're already dependent on federal money. So in other words, they're sitting in that lovely sweet spot where as soon as they start redistributing tax money all over to private enterprise, the federal government is going to be like a vulture on those private schools and homeschools. So this is what all that is for. You can go through here and you can look at how this all works. They received about $1,500 in Title I funding per low income child, less than all but 9 other states. They didn't receive a ton on that. This tells you what's required. To receive Title I funds, each state must establish its own statewide continuum of academic standards, assessments, accountability, measures, and targeted school supports. These are all things that schools receiving Title I funds have to provide. So we don't know. It's as yet unknown because these voucher programs, these ESA things are pretty new. It's as yet unknown when, how, by what argument the federal government might come in and start saying to these private schools, you let this kid in, you got to provide this stuff. You're taking the money, you have to provide this stuff. And how many people think that there will be constituents, because not everybody is a Republican is going to take this money. Not everybody, certainly almost nobody is going to be an objectivist or a libertarian, okay? People from all political persuasions are going to be taking this money, going into schools, even private schools that they claim to want so badly. And when they get there and suddenly realize I got to make my kids lunch and, oh, you're not getting the things I want, how many of them will it take to complain and say, it's not fair? Over at the private school, I'm entitled to blah, 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 or the public school, but I came over here and you're not giving it to me. How many of those will it take before some lawmaker goes, well, what we need to do is make all of the schools substantially equivalent to the public schools because they're taking taxpayer dollars? It will be a Democratic talking point. 100%. The unions will pick it up. The teachers who want to unionize will pick it up and say that's one of their platforms is getting the children cared for equally in the private schools. And of course, the UN will be only too happy to join them in that endeavor, as they pretty much already are doing. Because let's see if I can go find the union stuff or the stuff about the UN. Can't put my fingers on it. But basically, let me tell you another little story about Tennessee specifically, since we've gone over all this and I've showed you the federal stuff. Here's some Tennessee specific stuff. The Tennessee School Choice Program, this is from the Tennessean, and I don't have it's behind a paywall, so I had to get it, like copy paste it in a little tiny thing. I'm just reading it, okay? The Tennessee School Choice Program, specifically the Education Freedom Act of 2025, has introduced significant changes to the state's education budget. The legislation allocates approximately $447 million in total funding for the program, which provides $7,296 per student in state-funded scholarships to attend Category 1 through 3 state-accredited private schools. Do you think Yaron knows what state-accredited means? Yeah, that means the state is overseeing the private school to a fairly large degree. It's coming in and going, chick, 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 like, did you do the thing? Do you do the thing? Do you do the thing? Okay. I don't know if how that's so substantially better, other than they can maybe, kick out the miscreants, at least for now. Okay. This funding is intended to cover tuition and other education expenses for up to 20,000 students, with half of the slots reserved for families with incomes, well, at least theirs is mean tested, unlike Arizona. Incomes below 300% of the free and reduced lunch limit for children with disabilities. To address concerns about potential funding shortfalls for public school districts due to student enrollment drops, the bill includes a guarantee. Let me repeat that. The bill includes a guarantee that each district's state funding, TISA allocation, will not decrease from one year to the next. If a district's calculated TISA allocation decreases, the state will provide additional funds to ensure the district's allocation remains at least, so it can go higher, at least as high as the previous year. This provision aims to prevent public schools from being defunded by the program. Republicans. This provision aims to prevent public schools from being defunded by the program. So please explain to me how this is a step in the direction of defunding the public schools, or a step in the direction of making the government's reach smaller, a step in the direction of freedom. What is freedom anyway? I mean, how do we define freedom? What would be the definition of freedom? Let me look that up here. So Noah Webster, let's see. I'm kind of curious. I'm not going to go use today's Webster. Yeah, according to Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary, is everyone okay if I go back that far, back when, before we had compulsory public schooling? Freedom is defined as a state of exemption from the power or control of another. Liberty, exemption from slavery, servitude, or confinement. It is categorized as personal, civil, political, and religious. We're funding religious schools with this. All at the same time, putting the religious schools, in a vulnerable position where the government can go, okay. The term also refers to particular privileges, franchises, or immunities, such as the freedom of state. So, yeah, interesting. I don't see how that's getting us closer to freedom, but, maybe I don't understand freedom the way Yaron Brook understands freedom. Maybe we use different definitions of freedom. But in the world of me, putting a guarantee in a bill when you're the party of supposed, slightly closer to wanting to get rid of the government's control on education, and like I told you, that's not even true. That's not doing that at all. It's just creating another tier of government education with the appearance of private being private. There's another word that we have for that, actually. Charlotte Iserbyt, brought that to our attention way back when, after she was working in the Reagan administration, when she sort of discovered that this has been the plan to basically make public all of private school. This has been the plan since the mid-1950s, y'all. Al Shanker, president of the Union in 1956, suggested this as a means of co-opting, as a means of capturing and bringing under the state the private schools. The statists have never liked private schooling. They tried to ban homeschooling. Private schooling and homeschooling was banned way back in the way back. And thanks to the Little Sisters, whatever, that went to the Supreme Court in Oregon, they saved parochial education and also homeschooling by getting a Supreme Court decision that said that parents have the ultimate say. That saved private schooling. And, more than 100 years of this republic, we had only private schooling. Then we had to save it. And then having saved it, we've now had people working every day, all day, to try to get that power back. John Dewey didn't want private schools. Horace Mann didn't want private schools. None of these people wanted private, except for the elite of the elite, the uber elite, the people who could spend untold amounts of money to keep their kids out of these factory model, Prussian model schools. They could have private schools. That's okay. But the rest of us, no. They don't want enough of them to exist for us to have them. And every year at Harvard, every year they have a meeting where they discuss how to get rid of homeschooling. Don't you think it's going to be a lot easier when a sizable percentage of the population of homeschoolers in America is taxpayer funded and believes themselves to be dependent on it, or has been roped in under the state's control, so that the very definition of homeschooling in the state is you'll do this, 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 and this, and this, whether you take the money or not. So you might as well take the money, become one of our dependents, be one of our serfs. I just don't think he's thought this through. I know he hasn't. Or he just hasn't even looked. People have assured him, people have told him, people close to him have said this is great, or this is the best we can do, which is so unimaginative. It's shamefully unimaginative. There are myriad ways that we could incrementally, if that's what you like, roll back government control. Like I said, the first thing I would do, and that's what people thought Trump was going to do. I never did, but some of y'all did, is just get rid of ESSA, get rid of IDA, get a Republican Congress to say, we're not doing this anymore. These bills, these laws were passed by people who wanted federal control over education. We don't. We think it's been a disaster. We don't want to do that. This is going to, if the states want to provide this, they can provide it, but we're not doing it anymore. We're not going to make it mandatory. You want to do it voluntarily, knock yourself out. but you no longer have an unfunded mandate from us that we then are obligated to fund from Washington because we just made a mandate. Okay. That's what I would do. Number one, make them rein in their budgets enough. There's plenty of places to cut. May I make some suggestions? You don't need all those administrators. No, you don't. You don't need all those school counselors. You don't need to have a health center on site. This school is not the parents. That's it. We're not replacing parents literally with school. Even though you're going to tell me, but there's some kids that have terrible parents, blah, blah, blah. Some kids. There's going to be more of them. When you put something out there that replaces parents, what's my moral imperative to take care of my own kids? I'll just send them to school. Let me take care of, see a doctor, see a dentist, get their eyes checked, get their medications, get fed 2 meals a day. Next thing you know, there's going to be a cot in there for them to sleep on so I can pick them up whenever I feel like it, if I feel like it. I mean, after a point, like why do you have children? If you didn't expect to feed them, you didn't expect to clothe them, you didn't expect to provide their own medical care. And all we hear about every day is we're not having enough babies. Okay, well, if we're not having enough babies, then this shouldn't be a problem. Should it? If we have a negative migration pattern going, this shouldn't be a problem. Stop paying for all the things and restore parenting to, I don't know, parents. Restore education to states. Can we do that? Can we do that? Can we just get it back to the state? Get it out of the federal government. It hasn't been there for very long. Okay, that stuff is relatively new. Department of Education, in my lifetime. ESSA, things like that, slightly before my lifetime, but still, IDEA, all of that, my lifetime. These are not old, long-standing, been there since the dawn of the country. No, we can get rid of them. And if there were a will, if we had capitalized on the momentum coming out of COVID, we would have already done it. I really believe that. But instead, we're harnessing, people have come in, these grifters and moneymakers. Now, who are they? Who are the grifters and what is their incentive? Well, like I said, anytime there's a giant pot of government money, there's always going to be people standing around going, how do I get some of that? How do I get some of that? Well, you know who wants it the mostest? The people who have AI companies, software companies based on AI. They need people to train it. They really would especially love to get inside the minds of little bitty children so they can both, learn what trips their trigger from a behavioral standpoint and also, feed them some stuff back in the other direction to mold them into what kind of little global citizens they want them to be, so they buy more stuff and provide more data and serve as good little digital serfs. So how do you make sure you can have access to millions and millions of children's brains for 9 months, like all day, every day? How do you make sure you do that? And not only that, to know what's going on in their parents' lives and in their households and how much money they're spending and what they're spending on it. What better way than to provide some private education just in time for these ESA funds and voucher funds? Because guess what? They get to co-own the data. So they have to send the data to Washington, which already is an abomination. And the state gets to have the data that's collected from all the use of the kids, their eyeballs, their this, their that, their finger taps, all of it. That they get to store, by the way, for up to 70 years. They keep it. That's a lifetime of a person. So the state automatically owns it. The federal government automatically owns it, but so do the companies that they're interacting with, that they've contracted with, that the data passes through. Why wouldn't they? And they sit there and they say, we will never sell your data. Thank you, lawyers. It's pre-sold. And the way they get away with it is not only is it pre-sold, it's pre-sold in a different format than it came in, so they can get away with saying we don't sell your data. They're disaggregating it. They're analyzing it, doing kinds of things with it. They're not going, Deb Philman's data is in this little box. Yeah, okay, thanks. I still don't want them having it, because how do I know what they're going to do with it? And how do I know that all of that they're owning and then subsequently selling and doing things with and making other products with is for the betterment of the child who provided it? They're literally providing free information. They're sponging off them and using our tax dollars as seed money. Literally. And then they can create a separate company. So they can have the company that services the school. They take that money in, that gets the data, and then they have a separate parallel company that does stuff with the data. Enter people like Joe, what's his name? I can't remember his last name. Starts with an L. He's in Austin. but he buys and sells software companies. He's a billionaire. He's one person though. There are many of these tech bros and many of these ed tech companies. I've just had in the span of 1 week, 3 emails sent to me asking for people to come on my show. Like, what show? This is the first thing I've done in over a month. Okay. I know I had Paul Rossi on a while ago, but whatever. And the funniest one was the one from an SEL, a company that does mental wellness stuff in the school. Like, could you look the world over and find someone more aggressively opposed to putting mental wellness, mental health crap in the schools than me? And they actually cited my show with James Lindsay. They were captivated. It was so obviously written by AI, captivated by my show with James Lindsay about how, the schools are manipulating the self or whatever. And their product was the perfect antidote. And I'm like, are you high? Like, seriously, what, I couldn't resist. I wrote back, go home, AI, you're drunk. Because this was crazy. I signed my note disrespectfully because that they're doing now is they're literally just casting their net out. Anybody out there in the internet who's got, if you've seen the latest South Park, has a nut, and they gotta make their nut. Okay. And they're just so, is this person talking about education reform? Go find everybody who's ever talked about education reform or ever talked about school choice or ever talked about any of this, ever talked about mental health in schools, and just send them this blankety, pick a show, random show. Cause how random is that? James Lindsay, I promise you that, like, of all the shows to pick, that was the tell. And tell them how you want to come on the show and talk about your great product and how you're going to help schools, whatever. And they're sending it to me. But this is what they're doing. They want free advertisement. They think that by me wanting to put, look at what's out there for schools, whatever, that they can get on a show that reaches parents, and parents are going to, we need this in our school. And I'm going to give it to them for free. I wouldn't do it for money. You could offer me $1 million tomorrow. I'd be like, no, I'm not going to be evil. That's not who I am. But this is literally what they did. And I've gotten 3 of them in 1 week from 3 different ed tech purveyors. What's going on? Well, I told you what's going on. School choice is creating a trough. It's literally like a massive trough of money that private, so non-state actors is what the UN calls them, non-state. They are looking at going, yummy. Now we can raise our tuition. And as I told you, they already are. So I don't know if I didn't really set out to persuade you of anything other than the fact that Yaron Brook needs to check his premises. Okay. He's incorrect about how these vouchers and ESAs function. From a policy standpoint, he's incorrect about how schools function, how school taxes function, what money goes where, who pays what. And so therefore he can't say that this is a step in any good direction because he's already wrong on the premises. He'd have to roll it back. And then when you add to that the fact that he's contradicting everything that objectivism claims to stand for, which is, like reason, reality, accepting what is, like we look at what is and we say, this is what is. We don't, imagine a scenario that isn't, where people are getting handed a blank check to take to any private school and the government has nothing to say about it. That is not the reality of the situation. So we don't live there. So we don't base our opinions on school choice based on that. That's why I'm saying that he's, stepped out. And he needs to roll it back and check that. Because if you're saying that it's okay to take a government subsidy, already a contradiction, then your premise better be rock solid, rock freaking solid, that subsidy is your money, dollar for dollar. You get to do with it what you want, zero strings attached, and that there's no equal opposite reaction in response to you doing that to shore up the finances of the public school and make them invulnerable to your action. That's the minimum. And then we have to add in the fact that you're not taking it to a free market, because on the recipients have to jump through some hoops too in order to take it. There's somebody following. When I say follows the child, they mean it. They're literally, government is following your child. And they will follow them through their entire career in school, which currently they're not allowed to do when they're in private school or homeschool. Currently, my kid, the government doesn't know what the frick she's doing all day. And that's exactly how I like it. They don't know how much I spend on educating her. They don't know what I'm teaching her. They don't know where she is all day from hour to hour. None of their business. Zero. And that's how most homeschoolers I talk to want it. Real homeschoolers. Homeschoolers aren't going, ooh, there's money for homeschooling. Okay, cool. No, the people who've been doing it since before any of this, even before COVID, okay? We did it because we live our values and we don't want the government breathing down our neck. And that's the closest we can go to going galt for our families. And that's what we've done. The most I had to do is fill out some paperwork, say, yeah, my kid is being educated. Here you go. I have a high school diploma already. I think that's intrusive. Plenty of people without high school diplomas are smart enough to educate their kids. Otherwise, what the hell was the school education for? Guess it wasn't very good if it produces people who aren't up to the task of reproducing what they were taught at a minimum with how to read, how to do basic math. So, they're telling on themselves there. I already had to do that. But no, I'm not taking any money. And he's sitting there acting like, no, it's a free market solution. No, it's not. It's a controlled market. To the extent that the private school market is or was free, and like I told you, it's not if they got to be accredited and do all these things and jump through some state licensing, whatever hoops or whatever. They're already not completely in the free market. They're also not in a free market because the government has such a huge monopoly over the dollars that people spend on education. And then if you're going to take some of the same dollars and give it to them while the government gets to come over here, how is that a free market? How is that making the market more free? It's totally not. It's like, I'm not an economist. I'm just a mom and a teacher and a person with a brain, and I can observe reality and say, this is reality. A is A, Mr. Brook. And that is why I take issue with you. It's not personal. It's factual. That's what it is. And I think it's really shitty, to put a fine point on it, to delete comments that are not nasty. They're not full of invective. I wasn't calling you names. I wasn't, being like in any way so hostile that you needed to, tone it down and remove it. But you removed it. You removed my comment. You removed my husband's comment. You removed subsequent comments. I fully expect you to remove the argument I had with some guy on the other video who kept insisting that, this was a step in the right, blah, 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 defending you. I am allowed to comment also. I mean, it's your account. You can delete what you want. You can say what you want, but it's not going to shut me up. It's not going to stop me commenting on your video. I'm still going to go and do that, which I just did. So I stand by what I said. Check your premises. They're false. And I welcome you to come back, address the specifics of what I've said about Arizona's budget explosion, about the Tennessee guarantee to fund the public schools, about the federal involvement and the restrictions they put on recipients of taxpayer dollars that are schools, about the big, beautiful bills language about what they have to do and provide. And then you tell me, given all of those realities, how it is that this is incrementally a step towards freedom. Please, I'm begging you, I will sleep better at night if you're right and I'm wrong. I want to be wrong. That's the part you're missing. I've spent years, literally years, going over this and following this very closely and communicating with parents who are dealing with this on a daily basis. And in fact, that was the one thing I forgot to do. I had a parent right before the show send me something from Arizona, name withheld. Here it is. This is from somebody who homeschooled their children for 25 years, way before ESAs were ever a thing, way before even their youngest child graduated before universal school expansion. And this person fought for years against it. So not taking money, not doing anything, homeschooled at her own expense, still fought the school choice. As expected, this is what this person told me. As expected, even some Republicans are advocating for more ESA regulations. For more regulations. The superintendent of public instruction, Tom Horn, has come under fire recently for advocating for some caps on the amount. An AI, let's see. I know an AI answer is not necessarily what I'm looking for. Okay, I'm sending it anyway. Okay, so this is from AI. The person admits this came from AI. Just to sum it up. Since 2024, Superintendent Tom Horn and the Arizona State Board of Education have finalized the following changes to the ESA program. That's what every bureaucracy. You pass it one way, and as long as you put in place regulators, they can tweak it and change it tomorrow, the next day, next week, next year. It's all the Arizona one's already changed. These are the following changes. Enhanced oversight 2024. Pre-approval for purchases, expenditures over 500 require ADE pre-approval to ensure educational use. Doesn't sound like freedom to me. Real-time monitoring, Yaron. Don't you feel free? A digital system launched in 2025 flags suspicious transactions, reducing fraud by 15%. I told you, the second you go to spend public dollars, somebody wants to reduce corruption, fraud, and well, they should. It's public money. Mandatory parent training. Do you feel freer? Are you freer? I feel so free. Okay. Parents must complete training on proper fund usage for account renewal. Does this sound like your money? Does it sound like you're getting your money back? I don't know. See, I don't have somebody monitoring how I spend the money on my daughter. I don't have somebody putting any kind of real-time digital monitoring to see what I'm spending or what my kid is doing or anything like that. And if you think it's going to stop at what you're spending, you're dreaming. They're going to have real-time digital monitoring everything they're doing. This is just the start. Okay. Streamlined application process. An updated online ESA portal reduces application processing times from 45 to 30 days. Wonder what that cost. Who paid for that software? Pretty sure it was the taxpayers. So did they just get their money back, or was there some money spent in between increasing the budget, right? And now we got to maintain that software, and we got to probably update it, and we might need to improve it, and maybe we need to replace it, and so on and so forth. And so, okay. Expanded approval expenditures, added virtual learning, STEM-focused career and technical education, CTE, and mental health services. So this is starting to feel a lot like public school. So, the private schools that previously were like, we don't offer that, we don't offer that, we don't offer that. And the parents were perfectly fine with them not offering it. They were going and paying and not offering it. Now, not only are you going to have to raise their tuition to cover the staff and everything else to provide all this, but now that they're offering it, it's pretty much substantially just like public school because they won't have the same budget or time to deal with academics that they did before. Vendor approval tightened. So much freedom. Can't handle all the freedom. 2025, stricter vendor documentation requirements, reducing unverified vendors by 10%. Unverified vendors. So free, so much choice. So I wonder what the compliance costs are going to be for those vendors. They have to raise those costs and again, pass them on to the customer. Is this sounding like a free market solution to you? Again, I'm no economist. I'm just a mom. Expanded CTE and STEM vendor options, regulatory updates, 2024, quarterly expenditure reports and annual audits for a sample of accounts to ensure compliance. Stricter penalties for misuse, including temporary or permanent program suspension. Sources: Arizona Department of Education, Arizona State Board of Education, HB 2378. Don't you think it might have been a good idea before he had a live show saying, I fully support school choice, vouchers, and ESAs? This is the ESAs, the ones that he likes better. Imagine how the vouchers are, okay? So don't you think it might have been a good idea for him to do just, a little bit of research, just a little bit. This is how's it going? How's it going? Is it working that way? Is it actually free? Are people freer than they were last year? Is the New York Times article even true? Is it even valid? Did he cross-check it with anybody? Because I could have told you, we laughed. When that article came out, I wasn't going, oh, this is good news. Oh, they're struggling. No, I saw that headline. I was like, oh my God, the election campaigning is beginning. Crisis. Basically, the rule is if you see the word crisis, especially in the New York Times, that's your clue that there's not a crisis at all. There's one that's being manufactured for, political purposes. Usually to benefit the Democrat who's running. And in this case, he's a communist. So, there's that. A little bit more cynicism, Yaron, would be helpful for you, I think, just again, to remain objective. And I'm sorry to be so snarky, but like I said, You go and delete my comments. You're not going to address it yourself. You're not going to just go back and reply and defend what you said. You're not going to go and do your cursory research. I mean, this much research, this much. Okay. Then, yeah. I'm gonna come back and challenge you. So I await any response that you would like to provide as to how I'm just all wrong. I'm so wrong. Really, as I said, I would love it. I wish I were wrong. I wish I were wrong. I promise you, as I sit here right now, I make this vow. If you can come back and demonstrate to me that everything I just told you is false, that your premises are correct, that people are literally just getting cash to go do with as they see fit, and it's depriving the schools of money, and it's a step away from the government. If you can do that, I will come out here, I will mea culpa, I will apologize, and I will say, I am just so very sorry for making this video. And then I will go celebrate, because it will mean that we actually are freer, which is what I want, ultimately. Okay? Anyway, so thanks everybody for listening to me rant. Yes, it was a rant. It was. Some things are important. Some things are important to rant about. And the fact that our children are held captive in this system, and every time we try to break away, some grifter, some opportunist, some politically motivated, hack comes in to make their nut off our kids, I get my back up just a little bit. Yeah, I do. I'm pretty pissed off about it. And part of why I don't make as many shows as I used to is that getting this upset and getting this frustrated and having to state the obvious over and over again is extremely exhausting, because I don't make money doing this. He does. He gets paid to do what he does. I don't. I am here free. This is free. Okay. If you guys think I'm making like ad revenue, like dream on. I'm not. I don't get paid from YouTube. I mean, it's monetized, but like I haven't had a payout in I don't know how many months. I haven't had subscriber increases in I don't know how long, because I am persona non grata. Because when you take the position that you oppose school choice, you would think everyone's like, oh, it's so lefty run YouTube. Everybody supports school choice. Everybody, especially on the left, supports expansion of government in terms of these captured platforms. I don't make any headway on this. I don't make any money doing it. He does. So I can't devote my time to this. I'd rather be doing just about anything else than sitting here and doing this. But somebody's got to do it. Might as well be me. All right. Thanks, you guys. Please like, share, subscribe if you feel like it. Tell your friends what's really going on with school choice. Don't be so quick to run and sign up for it. It's very tempting. I know it is. You're going to sit there and tell me, but I need the money. I need the money. Oh, wait. Ian Gilmore shows up at the 11th hour to say, your base argument is just wrong. Yaron is advocating choice as a way to get a lever in to break up government-run schooling. And I've just spent 2 hours and 12 minutes and 46 seconds in detail, Ian, since you obviously haven't been here, explaining how it's not that. Okay? So he's advocating a fantasy. You might as well say he's advocating that a magic fairy comes in, waves a wand, and magically the schools are, disappear. Because school choice isn't that. It isn't a lever to break up government-run schooling. You can rewind this video to the part and where I showed you the Arizona numbers from the Goldwater Institute that clearly shows that their budget has exploded, where it also talks about the Tennessee bill that guarantees that the funding will not go down for the public schools, whether they lose students or not. Okay, it's written right in the bill. So what I'm telling you is what he's arguing, what the title of this show is, check your premises. Because what he's saying is false. He misunderstands and thus misrepresents how school choice schemes work in praxis. Okay? So all of this is theory. All of this is a nice little magical thinking theory, but it's got nothing to do with reality. And objectivists are supposed to live in reality, not their fantasy world where A affects B this way because I want it to. It's not how it works. He doesn't even understand how schools work. He doesn't understand how school funding works. That's evident in the way he talks. And it's insane. He's had way too much time to research this. I and several other people have implored him repeatedly for a month in comments under ARI podcasts, on his X account, etc., implored him to look into what's going on before taking a stand one way or the other, because at OCON, we heard some inklings that this was coming, that he was supporting this. But it was never so explicit as now. People have been warning him. People have been saying, look into the details. There's no excuse. Zero. None. None. I genuinely wish that you would go back, and I'm not making a good case for you coming back and spending time here. Okay. Let me try it a different way, because obviously I'm very upset right now, because the way he's handled this and handled the people who have tried in good faith to make him aware of what's going on prior to his videos and then obviously subsequently has been beyond dismissive. Okay. So yeah, I mean, excuse me if I don't have my kid gloves on. Let me try to make a case for you, as I just did about 10 minutes ago. In order for his argument to be valid, the money would have to be literally their money, which it's not. It would have to be open. So an account that they completely manage. In fact, he said that in his show, that they have money in an ESA account, which they can do with what they want. I've demonstrated on this show factually how that's not true. That is not correct. I've demonstrated it multiple different ways with evidence. He would also have to have shown how, as enrollment goes down on the public school side, assuming that it will, that the funding will also go down. And I demonstrated how that has not been the case already. It's not a projection or a paranoia on my part. That is factual. That is what has already occurred. And the Tennessee legislature has written it into their school choice bill that it will not occur. They have guaranteed, promised that it will not occur. So if you're claiming that a thing is going to work a certain way, and it already doesn't, you can't continue to say, well, if it does, then it will be great. It doesn't. And so then I am asking, and many of us have asked, how can it? It already isn't in the states where it's already been implemented. By what mechanism do you imagine that the other states that have yet to pass bills, and by the way, I've read most of those bills and they're no different. They're no different. So by what mechanism does he imagine that theirs are going to be different when they're already not different? How is it going to work differently? And then you have the issue of a free market. How do you get to a free market from an increasingly controlled market? So when you add controls to a market that's already pretty well controlled, they've got a monopoly, and the private set of the education system is this big, and you bring in public control into this tiny little semi-private market, how do you make this more free market? How does that work? Explain it. I genuinely want somebody to explain to me economically how you control all those levers. The right to do business, the right to accept money from people who are bringing it to you, what you offer in products, what information you collect and give back to the government, thereby incurring compliance costs. If the government controls all of that now in the private system, how do they take the money and move away from government control? It literally cramps my brain to try to think how you believe that. I don't agree with a few of those specific arguments, but I'll put on my list to go back and listen. I'd love to know which ones you don't agree with, because all I've done is state facts. It's not an argument that the Arizona budget has gone up, not down, for public schools. That's a fact, not an argument. So the argument is, if the budget has gone up for public schools, then school choice is not a means to reduce the budget and make us more free. It is not a means to make us less taxpayer dependent and on raising taxes and so on. It simply isn't functioning that way. That's my argument, based on facts, in evidence. Okay. And in terms of it being a way to get a better education, which really I thought was the goal, in addition to we want more freedom, most parents are hoping this is going to actually net their kid a better education. That doesn't even seem to be on the table, because better, it should be defined by the parents, not the government. But the government is coming in with the dollars and telling the private schools what they have to do to be in compliance with the state in order to get the dollars, thereby helping to define what better is, when they've already screwed it up on the public side. So they're not exactly reliable in terms of deciding what's good. My argument depends on the short-term budgets going down. Maybe that won't happen in the short term. Again, I solicited, so please bring it to me if you can find it. Show me where government has provided a subsidy in any industry and the budget for the subsidies has gone down, or the budget for the industry in terms of what they charge the end consumer has gone down. I'm dying to see it. We were told it was only short-term increases for healthcare too. We were told that, making the school, the loan system for colleges was not going to drive up tuition. Hello? And here we are. We were told a lot of things. There's no such thing as short-term government control when government has just built a new bureaucracy. That's what they've done. In Arizona, there's a brand new office that didn't exist before. Tennessee, same thing. Texas, same thing. These offices didn't exist before. So by definition, the budget has increased and will continue to be there as long as that agency exists. So the budget's up. I've never known a government to lower their budget from year to year. Have you? For any purpose. And that's going to vary too by how many kids are using it. And so the more kids want to use it, the bigger the budget's going to get. You're just going to go like this. Except you're always going to have the unions, the people who can't get into private school, the people who don't want to go to private school because they don't want to pay the extra amount because it's not in full. The school choice amount isn't enough to cover private school tuition. So then you're going to have these people over here bitching and moaning about it's not enough. I still can't pay for private school. That's not fair. You're funding private industry. You're not funding us enough. So they have motivation to keep funding this. The incentives, Ian, you have to look at the incentives. Where is the incentive for government to release us when this system's in place? What's in it for them? What's in it for their constituents? Who isn't there? We're not the constituents, by the way. Okay. The contractors, the people that, give them big donations, their friends, their cronies, those are their constituents. The union, we're not the constituents. That's been made evident by COVID. They didn't give a damn what we parents thought, what the kids wanted or needed. No, we came dead last. There's ample evidence. So I hope you do go back and listen. And I hope you, give these arguments a serious consideration. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. But I think you have an obligation to show how what Yaron said is factual, is based in fact. He doesn't get to hide behind if it worked this way. Because he didn't say, I would support it. He said, I do support it. And then he described a way that it works, that it simply doesn't work. False premises. Okay. But now I've been here too long. So thanks, everybody. Like I said, by all means, prove me wrong. Please, please, pretty please prove me wrong. All right. Have a great day, everyone.